everybody. You know, and I know Mississippi has an extra holiday in this state, so happy 13th check eve. It might not be a holiday to staff, but it is to your retirees in the state, so I know they appreciate that. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Ben Mobley. You all know Jonathan Craven used to accompany me to these meetings every year, and Jonathan has gone on and retired from Cabinet over the summer. So Ben has been working kind of behind the scenes and working on the municipal plan for many years. And he gets to come front and center and working on all of these plans with me. So let's see. There we go. Okay. So we've got quite a number of slides. We're going to be with you for a little bit. Glad the first part of the board meeting went very quickly. Got some changes we want to just kind of address. You know, you've seen my mug all year long. We've talked a lot about experience study assumptions and that kind of stuff. This is just a summary of what we have done this year and from the experience study that we presented in April and that the board adopted in August. The other thing is from our funding policy, and the investment experience has triggered the drop in the investment return from 7.75 to 7.55%. Because of the great return, that triggered a 20 basis point drop in our investment return assumption. Then the last thing is, if you do happen to look at the reports, and I hope you do, the valuation report and the projection report were always separate reports. But you know, we thought this was a perfect year because of this great return and the smoothing in of these investment experience, and based on the metrics of the funding policy, it was very important to combine the valuation results this year and going forward with the projection reports, because we have metrics that are for valuation purposes and for projection purposes. They need to be in one report. Okay, we need to go through. We always go through these together, but we thought it was very crucial to be in one report. Valuation key findings. We can't say it enough of the great return. The auditors even talked about it today. So why not? Let's talk about it even more. 32.2% return on a gross basis. Last year was around 3%. Now, we're smoothing that. We use a smooth technique. I joked with the auditors, you know, they give you that funded ratio on a market value basis at 70%. You know, we're going to see those investment gains occur over the next 4 evaluations as we smooth it in. So we recognize 20% of that gain this valuation. We're going to see it in the next 4 evaluations. And that's why the projection results are so key here, and to look at the metrics of that using the next 4 to 5 and then beyond from there. So a return on an actuarial value basis was only 12.5%. Now that's great. So we're trying to beat the 7.55 each year. So each year we beat that, we have investment gains. Okay? And we're predicted to beat that as long as we don't see a big drop in the markets and some negative returns. This 32.2% return is going to be with PERS for the next 4 evaluations. So we could see some significant investment gains over the next 4 months. Can't say that enough because that's so important. So our funded ratio did increase. Might not have increased as much as we would have hoped, but again, we're dropping the discount rate for this valuation. That comes, by doing that, it comes with some increased liabilities. So the assets have grown, but so have our liabilities. But it did grow to 61.3, about 80 basis points there. When you see the projection results, you're going to see it even increase, and we're going to see it probably, hopefully, increase very quickly. The amortization period using the current fixed contribution rate of 17.4% of payroll is 50.9 years. And I read that. I don't usually read my bullets. That's an important thing to realize, and I want to spend a little time explaining that because that's an eye-opening number, right? 50.9 years. What does that mean? So that means based on the $19 billion unfunded liability as of the valuation, it would take 50.9 years to pay that off using 17.4% of pay. However, that's looking at it as a snapshot as of June 30th, 2021. It doesn't have any investment gains built into that number, okay? So it's a snapshot of the $19.4 billion. That's your mortgage. How many years will the 17.4% of payroll take to pay that off? Now, we built this funding policy in place to drop the discount rate when we have investment gains because it's going to be used. That drop in the assumption and that increase in liability is going to be used by a lot of the investment experience. So 1 year's numbers may look bad. But as we bring in those investment gains over the next few years, you're going to see that 51 years drop very, very significantly. And I've got numbers to prove that. Okay? So while that number is shocking, you need to have the projection results as part of reviewing that number to really see the big picture of these results. So, I spent a lot of time on that, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. Okay? Again, you'll see it on the next slide of how fast that 50 years comes down as we're getting these investment gains. The actually determined contribution, we calculate another contribution rate to kind of be our bogey to see how are we doing. And again, we're looking at it on a snapshot basis without any note of what may happen in the future. And that came out to just about 21.5% of payroll. And when we take that ratio, we come up with 123.5 when we take the 21.49 and we divide by 17.40. And that's one of the metrics of the funding policy that could trigger an increase in the contribution requirement. Okay, again, that's above our 10% threshold. That's in the red category. But without looking at the projection results and just looking at this number by itself, it's hard to see the full picture of where we're headed. So let's look at those results. So I've got here two sets of projections. One is a short-term projection over the next 5 to 6 valuations to see how this investment gain of 32.2% goes into and pays down the unfunded accrued liability. So the second column there is our unfunded actuarial accrued liability, UAAL. We show it in millions of dollars, $19.4 billion as of this valuation. But you see, next year prediction, 18.4 billion, 17.5, 16.5. These investment gains are paying down $1 billion of that. We have $1 billion every year that we're recognizing as investment earnings. Above anything else, this is assuming everybody comes back to work, everybody gets pay raises, everybody retires, everybody dies when we expect them to, and we don't have a lot of demographic gains and losses to really build because we do experience these every 2 years. So we're really honed in on the assumptions and behavior of folks, so we don't see that. So this $19.4 billion, where it looks pretty bad, in 4 valuations, we'll be back down to $15 billion mark. We'll pay off over $4 billion just from the smoothing technique of actuarial math. Okay? And you see on the funded ratio column, we go from 61.3, and we're adding 2.5 or more % every year into that. So by the time you get down to 2025, 2026, we're at 72%. I think the auditor said we're about 70% on a market value basis. So you can see as the smoothing works itself through the process, and let's give it time to work through the process, the plan could be, we're really going to see that funded ratio increase pretty significantly. And you see the next column is the amortization period. Again, we go from 51 years to next year at $18.4 billion, using the 17.4, now it only takes 41 years to to pay down that unfunded. And another 7 years is taken off after the next year, and then 6, and then 5, and then we start getting into our 1 years at a time is what we expect that amortization period to go in. So again, just showing that 50 years, and that's why I spent a lot of time on it, is not the full picture. We need to look at these next 4 valuations as key to making decisions going forward. I throw in cash flow in the ADEC, FCR ratios there just to give you context. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then looking at our long-term projections, so our metric is to look at the funded ratio in 2047. That's our one metric that we want to make sure we're getting close to or at around the 100% mark. We're at 93.5% projected in 2047. That's in the green status. Our cash flow as a percentage of assets is negative 5.65%. That's in the green status. You can see last year those 2 metrics were yellow. So we're making significant progress on those metrics. And then the ADEC FCR ratios there, obviously as of last year they were red, and this year they're red, but I showed the 2025 valuation just to show you that, you know, within a 3 to 4 year window, that metric will be back down to yellow. It will not make it to green, and we'll show you that in the projection analysis, but it's 100.9%. That means your ADEC is approaching 17.4%, and that's where we kind of wanted to go. So let's dig a little bit further into the valuation results for PERS. Just to give you a flow of the context, I'm going to go through PERS. Ben's going to hit highway control and the legislative plan pretty quickly. Then I'm going to come back for all of the projection and sensitivity analysis that we need to share with y'all. All right, one of the big things that we notice in the valuation process for this year is active counts are down again. Okay, we've been talking about this for years and years, from when we were at 170,000 active members. Well, now we're down below 150,000 and approaching 145,000 active members. And I always told you we're trying to fund a pension plan using active payroll, which makes up your contributions to fund the plan. So that drop, precipitous drop over the years has really been one of the things that's hurt the funding of the pension plans, all right? So we're hoping this is a COVID impact result, that folks retired, weren't replaced. I thought maybe it was on the teacher side, like we're seeing across the country when a lot of retirements happened in June, or May and June, and then they just didn't get hired back before that date. But we looked, state agencies, it's across the board, municipalities, it's across the board of where that drop is. So we're hopeful that next year that will start coming back. But, you know, I've said this the last 3 years that we've kind of hopefully reached our plateau, and I've been wrong. So I won't say that again, but we do run the projections as a static population going forward. So we are assuming 145,000 active employees go forward, just for what it's worth. The number of retirees has grown by another 2,300, just to show you, you'll see it in the projections, but we project out to get to about 145,000, 150,000 retirees in the plan within the next few 10 to 20 years. So, you know, we're going to have a 1-to-1 ratio of active to retiree population. But I think that tends right around 2033, 2034 when we get to the worst part of it. Payroll, you know, payroll's gone from $6.023 billion to $6.246 billion in 6 years. That's only a 0.37% increase each year. Okay. That's a lot less than what our assumptions are, which we assume about 2.75% each year. So that's been the reasoning, or the reason from the active population drop. Actual benefit payments have been growing, on the other hand, by 4.5%. We've got new retirements, we've got everybody getting a 3% compounding COLA, That's why you continue to see that retiree benefit payments grow by over 4%. Take a look at the last 10 years of assets for PERS. The dotted line there is the market value of assets, and you can see in 2021 the big jump there to $35 billion. And the smooth line, the actual smooth line, is the green line there. Again, for most plans that contribute an actuarially determined contribution, we use that smoothing approach so our contribution requirements from one year to the next don't look like the markets. All right? We want to have a smooth value of line. Doesn't really work here in PERS because of the fixed contribution methodology, but we still show it that way. Here's a look at how we're financing. So all of those members, active, retirees, deferred vested, spouses, everybody collecting a benefit or entitled to collect a benefit in the future has a liability. We add up all those liabilities for everybody to get $54.6 billion. So if PERS had $54.6 billion today, we wouldn't need to put in another dime into the bank account. We would be able to cover the projection of all future benefit payments for all of those members, okay? But we don't. On an actuarial value basis, we only have $30.7 billion. So we need to come up with the rest. Where is the rest coming from, okay? Some of it's coming from member contributions. That's the present value. That's $3.8 billion is projected to come from active members paying their 9% into PERS. The rest comes from normal cost from the employer. Part of that 17.4 is going to pay off the remaining accruals that the employees are not paying. So that's a small little sliver there. And then the rest comes from paying down that unfunded of $19.4 billion. So here we are, look at the funded ratio, 61.3% this year. Again, that's a drop, that's an increase, so that's good to see, but again, the projections show it going up pretty significantly. So here's our report card for assumptions versus actual experience, and this is where we analyze our trends, make sure our assumptions look good, and what we saw kind of in the year for behavior. Obviously, you've got your investment return going one way and your assumption changes on the bottom going the other way. They almost cancel each other out. So you've got 1 year of your investment gains are covering that drop in the discount rate from 7.75 to 7.55. So now the next 4 years is gravy, right? That's why you see that UAL drop so quickly, because all of the next $1.3 billion gains are going right towards paying down that unfunded. We don't have to worry about any other assumption changes that are going to increase costs, potentially. The one thing I'll just kind of refer to is the mortality gain. It's there, it's a COVID impact. Right? We're seeing this for a lot of statewide systems where we have mortality, more deaths than what we expected. Right? That's the COVID impact. We saw more deaths in the state versus what we expected. And that's an actuarial gain for PERS. Right? We also saw on the other side a withdrawal loss. That's another COVID impact. Right? What were folks doing last year, this fiscal year? They were working, but they weren't going out and trying to find another job, right? They stayed where they were because, you know, they're working from home. There wasn't much out there to do. They decided, let's stick it out. I'm not going to leave PERS. Well, when they stay at PERS and they don't, you know, that sometimes results in an actuarial loss. All right. Because they leave more and they take their money. PERS gets the rest of that money. That's a gain. That was kind of just a look at some of the different pieces of that. So again, this is just a breakdown of the employer rate, how the 17.4% is used. I'll just kind of concentrate on the middle column there, the UAL piece of it. So most of it's going, some of it, a little piece of it's going towards the normal or normal cost. That's 1.77. The remainder, so 15.63% of that 17.4 is going to pay down the unfunded each year. Okay. That's how we come up with our amortization period. As far as calculating the actually determined contribution, So we take that $19.4 billion and we're amortizing it similar to a mortgage, and we set up a base mortgage in 2018 of just under $17 billion, and we're paying for that every year over 30 years. We have a 30-year mortgage. We're down to 27 years on that mortgage. And so far, the last 3 years, we've made additions to the house, right? We've built on to our attic, we built a bigger garage, we built some in the backyard, whatever. We built onto that debt by making assumption changes or having actuarial losses in the year. So those are those other three numbers. I anticipate to see a number with parentheses around it next year. That's a gain. That's what we'll see based on the investment experience for next year's valuation. We want to see more parentheses numbers, right? Those are gains. We anticipate to see those. So when we take, so when the payment to pay this down using this amortization methodology is about 19.72% of payroll. So when we add that to our normal cost of 1.77, that's how we come up with the 21.49%. So again, this 21.49, if that was what was being contributed to PERS, we would pay that down under this schedule. So about 27 years, okay, not 50 years. So if the contribution was 21.5, we pay that amortization of 19.4 billion down in a lot less time. Again, without consideration of those investment gains that we're going to recognize. So let's talk about the projection results. So again, valuation's great, but looking at enhancing and doing valuations for the next 30 years is very crucial to see where the plan is headed. And I'm happy to say it's really headed in the right direction. Last year, if you recall these numbers in 2047, we were looking at numbers like 67.6% funded ratio in 2047. So we've now gone from 67.6 to 93.5%. That's phenomenal news. All right, that is great news. We'll take it. Mr. Higgins said that at the beginning. We're very happy with the numbers we're seeing. We're cautious. We're cautious. We're going to show a lot of the sensitivity. We're always cautious with things like that with investment experience. We never know when we're going to have another 2021 the other way or not. Hopefully we have lots of 2021s positive. But looking at it on a stable basis, on a deterministic basis where all of our assumptions are met, this plan is heading in the right direction. Okay, we've got a graph, so you don't have to memorize these numbers, but you see the trend of the graph, we're going in the right direction. You see that UAL as 0 in 2051. All right, based on this schedule and the investment gains coming in, that UAL, unfunded accrued liability, will be 0 within this 30-year period. That's great news to see. We haven't seen this in a while, right? So here's a look at the graph of that funded ratio. And I really like this graph because it shows you a couple things, right? The blue bar is our assets, okay? And we're using actuarial value of assets. And you really see that blue bar over the next 4 to 5 years grow from $30 billion to $40 billion, okay? Again, we've got $35 billion in the bank. $30 billion we're recognizing as actuarial value, that's smooth technique. But in 5 years or so, we're going to be close to $40 billion on a market value basis and on an actuarial value basis. If our cash flow continues and we continue to get 7.55% returns. When you add the green bar and the blue bar, that's the liability of all the plans. So this is about $50 billion now, accrued liability, and that's going to grow. I mean, folks are retiring, folks are living longer. We anticipated liabilities to grow. So we want our assets to grow. So we're excited to see that blue part of the bar grow. The green part is the unfunded, and when you divide those two numbers, that's the red line, is our funded ratio. You really see the striking upward slope in that line over the next 4 valuations, to where we almost get to about 72, 73, 74% funded, And then it slowly goes up as assumptions, you know, kind of life goes on, if you will. And we have no more gains or losses. We'll continue to head towards that upward track towards paying off the unfunded liability. So that's one of our metrics, 2047. What is the funded ratio? It's 93.5% in 2047. The other metric is the cash flow. Where are we headed in cash flow? Okay, so you know we're at negative 4.5 now. We're headed down. We know we've been looking at this for years. We know in 2033, 2034, 35, we realize that there's going to be that kind of plateau of the number of retirees living. But we also know that there's not as many PERS active members making it to retirement than there was in the past generation. So we're seeing that, that cash flow kind of level off in that 2034, 35 area, and then heading back in towards more of a positive direction. I put a sustainable line in there just to show you the difference between the discount rate and the COLA assumption, so about 4.55%. As long as we're heading in that direction above that sustainable line, we're heading in the right direction. If this red line is below this blue dotted line for all of these years, you'd be in the red status. First off, that's why we built those metrics. But that would be an issue for us. So you see that positive direction after the next 15 or so years. And then the last metric is looking at that ADEC to FCR ratio. And this is what I was saying, you know, we showed the numbers earlier, but the graph is really telling of how that actually determined contribution comes down very significantly towards that 17.4% green line. That's your fixed contribution rate within the next few valuations. Now it does go up as the amortization and the funding policy works, but it doesn't really ever get out of hand like we saw in the previous model or in the previous projections, where this ratio is getting significantly out of hand. It's reasonable. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that, you know, if I know returns are looking so far so good for this fiscal year, we've got, you know, 6 more months to go. But that doesn't mean that if, you know, the plan gets 1%, 5% this year, that I might not be back next year asking for a contribution rate increase, or for the board to consider a contribution rate increase. That doesn't proceed that, but we'll get to that in a second. So here's a conclusion of everything that I kind of went over. You know, although the ADEC FCR ratio is in red status for this valuation, we believe that, you know, showing the projection over the next 4 to 5 valuation gets it back towards yellow status and just about almost green status, that we feel there's no recommendation from our part for the board to consider an increase in the 17.4%. Now, that decision did not come lightly. You know, we thought about it a lot. We were here last year, if you recall, recommending, and this was before the investment experience, this was after the 2020 valuation, saying, you know, we really think the board should consider and the state should consider raising that to 19.6%. You know, but we feel at this point, let's see how the investment experience and the next few valuations go, to see if, you know, if maybe a year from now we don't ask for another increase. But for right now, based on these projections, we feel like the state can, and the PERS can stand at just the 17.4% at this time. So any questions on the PERS results? I'm going to be back again to go over all the sensitivity analysis on the risk assessment. But if not, I'll get Ben up here to go over highway patrol and the legislative plans really fast.
Very good to be able to be here and speak with you today, especially on a valuation where there's good news to share. We'll start off looking at the highway safety patrol system first, and then I'll speak a little bit towards the legislative system. There's a lot of overlap between what has happened last year with PERS and some work in these other two systems, so I'll try not to be too repetitive if it's not necessary. So again, for highway safety patrol, changes from this year a lot as far as the assumption changes, a lot are very similar to PERS. Most notably, most significant is the decrease in the discount rate from 7.75 to 7.55%, as well as for highway safety patrol, the more specific demographic assumptions were tailored towards that system as well. Again, the most significant was the decrease in the discount rate. Some key findings, again, the market return was right around 32.5%, so kind of a similar number to PERS. Again, because we're using the 5-year smoothing of assets on the actuarial value basis, the return was only 12.6%. I say only, but that still considerably beats the assumed rate of return for 7.75% for this past year. So again, we saw for highway safety patrol the funding ratio increase from 66.5% to 70.4%. Using the fixed contribution rate at 49.08%, the amortization unfunded is 21 years. That's down from last year, 21.7. So we saw good news there that the amortization period for the system actually is coming down. And again, the projection results we'll get into a little more detail thereon. But the main result is that in 2042, the funding ratio is projected to be 128.5%. I believe last year was on to be about 88.3%. So again, it's a great number, very good result. So again, looking at the liabilities that we calculate each year for the system, again, the amount we would need to have today to be able to pay out all future benefits would be $631.7 million. Right now, what we have in terms of the actual value of assets as of the valuation date is $403.7 million. So we expect in the future to get some contributions from the members as well as from the employers in terms of normal costs, the cost to fund the accruing future benefits of active members as they continue to work towards retirement. So again, for members, it's about $18.3 million, and from the employers, about $40.3 million. So that leaves the payments to draw down the rest of the unfunded liabilities of about $169.4 million. That's the green wedge there. Again, looking at on the next slide, looking at our gain loss analysis for the year, sort of what happened in the past year based upon what we assumed to happen and what actually happened. Really the main storyline here, again, the investment return of about $17.8 million gain there for the excess return. Again, this is only 1/5 the actual return we saw on a market value basis. So again, we're going to hopefully, if all the assumptions kind of played out as expected, we're going to kind of continue to see a gain sort of around this same size over the next few years. Again, the assumptions tended to have the effect of increasing liabilities, so we see a little bit of a loss there, about $2.5 million. The rest of this is sort of broken down by the various assumptions we look at in use experience studies. I'll just highlight one or two. Again, for the mortality, we also saw a gain here. Again, for more deaths than was expected, about $2.6 million. As well as for salary increases, were not quite as high as we normally would expect. Again, for salaries, we, from an actuarial standpoint, we assume a set assumption each year for salaries going forward. So it's kind of we assume it happen every single year. We know in practice that that's really not going to happen. That salaries kind of come in a little bit of phases a little bit. So one year might be a larger increase. Then other years there may be very little or no increase. So the actual experience can kind of shift quite a bit for that. So for the a little bit of the recent history of the funded ratio for the highway safety patrol. Again, we saw an increase from last year from 66.5% up to 70.4%. Historically, it's kind of, your recent history has been kind of in the mid to higher 60%. So it's kind of great to kind of see it kind of cross over that 70% threshold again. So that's again good news there. A little breakdown of the 49.08% fixed contribution rate, sort of how that's being allocated to normal costs unfunded. So for normal costs, that we're using 16.29% of that fixed contribution rate to go towards paying the next year's worth of accruing benefits for active members, and that's leaving 32.79% to go towards paying down that unfunded accrued liability. looking at the projections and looking at the baseline projections at 7.55%, and assuming the 49.08% contribution going forward. Again, we'll look at the graph, which I think is a little bit easier to visualize these numbers, which is to kind of point out again the funding ratio there getting to 100% by 2042, and how quickly the amortization period draws down in the next few years. So again, you see that more clearly on this graph, these next several years as we continue to smooth out this market return, how steeply the red line goes up for the next few years before it kind of starts to gradually go up from there. You can see the green bars there representing the unfunded accrued liability and how that disappears by 2032. All right, moving on to the legislative plan. Again, same kind of thing I said for the highway safety patrol, that there were assumption changes there affecting them as well, both across the board, the lowering of the discount rate, but also very specific demographic assumptions changed for them based upon their experience. And then the key findings there again, the market return was about 32.6%, with an actual value asset return of about 12.6%, again, due to 5-year smoothing. In the case for the legislative plan, funding ratio actually held level at about 78.7%, so it didn't go up a whole lot. We'll sort of talk about what happened for it when we get to the gain loss in just a little bit. Again, using the fixed contribution rate of 7.40%, the amortization to pay off the unfunded is down to 25.1 year. Again, that's a decrease from last year, 27.7 years. So again, we're seeing for this system, the amount of time it's going to take to pay off the unfunded come down. In this case, more than a year, which is good news. Projection results, we get to look at those in more detail. It's going to show that, again, in 2042, the plan is projected to be funded at 129.8%. Again, I think last year it was at 88.3% as well. So again, this is a significantly good result of improvement from last year. Again, on a liability basis, the present value future benefits for this system is 28.